There's an interesting piece in the Washington Post by Liz Sly, and in it she interviews General Patraeus about the Middle East. Now, everybody in the Washington bubble will tell you that this guy is an absolute genius. But my main takeaway from the points that he makes in this, he's confused. He's definitely not the genius that everybody thinks he is. And really, when you dig down, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So first, he talks about what we've already done in Iraq, and he says the following, quote, "It is impossible to return to Iraq without a keen sense of opportunities lost. These include the mistakes we, the U.S., made here, and likewise the mistakes the Iraqis themselves have made. This includes the squandering of so much of what we and our coalition and Iraqi partners paid such a heavy cost to achieve." Okay, so what's he doing there? Well, he's hinting that, oh, we put in so much work here under the Bush administration, and then Obama comes along and kind of messes everything up by, doing more what the American people want. So if it's not clear yet, he continues, quote, "What has happened in Iraq is a tragedy for the Iraqi people, for the region, and for the entire world. It is tragic foremost because it didn't have to turn out this way. The hard-earned progress of the surge was sustained for over 3 years. What transpired after that, starting in late 2011, came about as a result of mistakes and misjudgments whose consequences were predictable. And there is plenty of blame to go around for that." So he's not saying, I regret that we went into Iraq at all. I regret that we went in there in the first place in 2003 because that was a mistake. What he's saying is, if only we stayed longer, if only we kept those hard-fought, hard-earned gains that we got during the surge. Now, right off the bat here, there should be red flags all over the place, because that's really an insane idea when you think about it, because as we've discussed many times on the show before, when you go back and look at the media coverage of the surge, it was 100% Orwellian. Because what happened is the Bush administration would do press releases every time that we would get a report as to how it's going during the surge. And whenever the violence went up, they said, oh, that's great. That shows that the surge is working because it proves that the, quote, insurgency is in its last throes. And then the media would, report that uncritically time and time again. But then also, when you saw a dip in the violence, they would come out and say, oh, see, less violence. That proves that the surge is working. But then the next month, it would go up again. And they'd come out and make the argument again. Oh, no, that shows that the insurgency is in its last throes. And this would go back and forth, month in, month out. So what does that tell you? It tells you that no matter what data, what facts come out of the situation, the same conclusion is reached, that the surge is working. So you've made it a non-falsifiable claim. You've turned it into a religion that no matter what, we say the surge is working, and that's our mantra, and that's the end of the conversation. Whether the violence goes up or down, the surge is working. So now he's coming out here and he's saying, oh yeah, all those hard-fought, hard-earned gains that we had during the surge, and then we squandered it in 2011. Again, not saying, hey, we shouldn't have gone in there in the first place. He's saying, wasn't it great when we conquered more territory in Iraq and just push the problems deep under the surface, further under the surface, where they would later bubble up and bubble out? It sounds gross, bubble up and bubble out. And John McCain, actually, of all people, had a great line about this, going back to, I think, 2007 or so, or 2006, where he says, we're playing a game of whack-a-mole in the Middle East. Remember that old game, whack-a-mole? You hit the thing, and then it pops up somewhere else. You hit the thing, and then it pops up somewhere else. Well, that is exactly what we were doing in the Middle East, specifically in Iraq, and that's exactly what we were doing with the surge. So to say that the surge was working, no, you just successfully whacked one of the moles, and then it's just a matter of time until the next one pops up. See, the only way you can make this argument and be consistent about it is if you say, after we did the surge, we needed to maintain those higher troop levels and keep it like that forever. That's the only way that you can be consistent in making this argument. That it's a good thing that, we the place we were in 2010 and 2011 in Iraq. So your argument is it's great that we did all this violence and fought more and took more territory and pushed the violence more underground, and I think we should have stayed in that situation longer. Because whether we started drawing down in 2011 today, or if we start drawing down in the year 2027, whatever it happens to be, no matter what, when we leave, it's going to go to shit. Because Iraq isn't a real country to begin with. You have all these different warring factions that are at each other's throats for power. So no matter what, whenever we leave, it's going to go to shit. But your takeaway from this is, oh no, we should have just kept doing the surge thing. But then you're just putting American lives at stake for a fight that has nothing to do with the United States of America. And remember, the entire thing in Iraq was based off of Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. I love how we totally forgot the original justification for going in there and how that was bullshit. It's almost like they go, okay, yeah, we know that was bullshit, but hey, we're here, we might as well stay here. What? Why? That's like you're in the middle of punching somebody in the face in a street fight, and you figure out that's not the guy that just spit on your girlfriend or some shit, and it's somebody else. What are you going to do? Are you going to go, oh, fuck it, I'll just keep hitting him in the face? No, if you're any kind of normal, sane, rational person, you go, oh, whoops. Sorry, man, please don't sue me. Here's like $50 and I'm out. I mean, this is what a rational reaction would be, but they're not doing that. But I'll explain exactly why that is in a second. So let's continue here. He says, quote, I think Iraq and the coalition forces are making considerable progress against the Islamic State. In fact, I would argue that the foremost threat to Iraq's long-term stability and the broader regional equilibrium is not the Islamic State. Rather, it's the Shiite militias, many backed by and some guided by Iran. Here we go again. Okay. You just lost all credibility. All credibility. Because if you follow the news closely, as I do for a living, and as everybody who listens to my show, they're all news junkies, they all know exactly what's going on in the world, you see that while, yes, the Iranian regime is religious, and they have done many bad things, and we can point to them and say, that's fucked up, that's fucked up, that's fucked up, no doubt. But you cannot say that the violence and the atrocities of ISIS are equal to that of the Iranian regime. You just can't say it. And the main reason why is when you talk about ISIS, this really is a group that has, aspirations to spread jihad all around the globe. Whether or not they're able to do that is a separate question, but that's their goal. Their goal is to spread it further and further and to attack nonstop. Whereas Iran, while we may totally disagree with them and their religious aspect of their government and a plethora of different things, they're not planning to, topple all these different world governments in Europe and in America and spreading to the West. They're just not doing it. Quote, the number one long-term threat to Iraq's equilibrium, he continues, and the broader regional balance is not the Islamic State, which I think is on the path to being defeated in Iraq and pushed out of its Iraqi sanctuary. The most significant long-term threat is that posed by the Iranian-backed Shiite militias. So he repeated his thing. This is later on in the interview. If ISIS is driven from Iraq and the consequence is that Iranian-backed militias emerge as the most powerful force in the country, eclipsing the Iraqi security forces, much as Hezbollah does in Lebanon, that would be a very harmful outcome for Iraqi stability and sovereignty. Not to mention our own national interests in the region. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. So his argument isn't, well, the Shia militias are more barbarous and worse people than the Sunnis and ISIS. No, he's saying, well, there are some factions of the Sunnis that we can buy off easier and are willing to give us the oil and the natural resources. Whereas the Shias are more aligned with Russia, for example, Assad in Syria, he's Shia, and they're more aligned with governments that we're not exactly on buddy-buddy terms with right now. So if the Shias get more control in that area, then geopolitically, Russia and other countries have more control in that region. Whereas if more so-called moderate Sunni factions get control, well, then maybe we can get more natural resources and more oil, and that'll work out better for us, they think. God, it all comes down to power and control and natural resources and staying on top. That's what it comes down to.